This is a roll call for attendance for the September 30th JLARC meeting. Mark Mullet,
is here.
Linda Wilson, Bob Hasagawa,
Here.
Rebecca Saldana, Shelley Short,
I'm here.
Dean Taco, Keith Wagoner,
Wagoner is here.
Ed Orcutt, Representative
Sorry, they're doing a roll call. I had to jump in.
Okay, thank you. Jerry Paulette,
Good morning.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Jake Fye.
I see him. He's here. I can see him on our screen.
Okay, I'll say that he's here. Noel Frame.
Here.
Thank you. Drew Stokesbury. Representative Stokesbury. Okay. Larry Hoff. Representative Hoff. Okay. Christine Kilduff.
Present. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Vicky Kraft. Representative Kraft. Not present. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 present.
I know Senator Wilson is having computer challenges. She said she's going to be on any minute. She's just having
Okay.
technical difficulties. Okay, so with that, we have a quorum. I think we're going to start, Keenan, I think, right? Do you want to introduce to the committee the interns, and we can go ahead and do that first?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all the committee members. It's nice to see everybody virtually and with various backgrounds. It's good to see folks joining us. I just wanted to let people know that, introduce you to a couple of graduate school interns that had worked at JLARC over the summer. We were really appreciative that they were willing to assist us in a remote setting. We threw them into the remote setting like everybody else, and they just did a fabulous job. What we're going to do is have them actually, maybe I can just have them turn their videos on briefly. I won't embarrass them and make them say anything, but Ashley Trunell and Camille Hawkinson, who are students at the UW Evans School of Public Policy and Governance. They joined us in June, and they're just finishing off their work here and returning back to school, but we appreciate their help. And you'll actually see them later in the agenda. We're going to have them do one of the presentations related to a future study when we get to the proposed study questions. So thanks, Camille and Ashley, and I hope everybody has an opportunity to say hi to them later when they join us.
Yeah, and then before we go into the motion on approval of the minutes, I definitely want to compliment JLARC staff. They received another award at the NCSL meeting this past summer around the report of employment and community inclusion for people with developmental disabilities. And I know the committee is very grateful for the staff for, once again, bringing national renowned positive attention on JLARC. Thank you very much. I would entertain a motion in order to approve the July 22nd, 2020 JLARC meeting minutes.
So moved.
There's been a motion and a second, and we will try to do this as quickly as possible, but we will have JLARC staff conduct a roll call of the votes to approve the minutes.
This is a roll call vote to approve the July 22nd meeting minutes. Representative Phi,
Aye.
Representative Frame,
Aye.
Senator Hasagawa,
Aye.
Representative Hoff, Representative Kilduff,
Aye.
Representative Kraft, Senator Mullet,
Aye.
Representative Orcutt,
Aye.
Representative Paulette,
Aye.
Senator Saldana,
Aye.
Senator Short,
Aye.
Representative Stokesbury,
Absent.
Senator Taco,
Absent.
Senator Wilson,
Aye.
Senator Wagoner,
Aye.
11 ayes and 4 absents, so it passes.
Okay. And I think next we're going to go to the proposed 2021 JLARC meeting schedule. And do you have a way to share that screen, Keenan, or people just click on their own link, or what's the best way to go over that?
Yeah, if the support staff could bring that up.
And just for the members of the committee, I think that they don't produce you'll have a rough 105-day outline of the session that'll come out probably sometime in December. So I think the thought from the executive committee was the February and March meetings, we might be flexible on the I-900 meetings to accommodate what the legislative schedule looks like. But for right now, they're scheduled for a Wednesday like normal. But we acknowledge in the executive committee that we may want to move those to a Tuesday or Thursday, depending on what the calendar looks like. But does staff have a way to share that, or? Aha. So you can see the one January 6th is before session, and the one May 12th would be after the regular session. Then you'd have the I-900 hearings. April 28th is actually after the regular session as well. And so there's just the two during session, the February 3rd and March 10th, which we're going to have some flexibility on their dates and times.
And then if I can, Senator, just point out that at this point, the ones during session and right after, you'll see they're scheduled currently at the noon hour. And the other ones we're now going forward. This afternoon's I-900 hearing we'll have at the usual, at the 2 o'clock slot that we've been doing. But the executive committee thought going forward to have the I-900 hearings at 1 p.m. if it's the same day as a regular JLARC hearing in the morning.
Just so the members of the committee know, I think our thought was if you're in person in Olympia, you might get more people willing to just go get lunch for that hour from 12 to 1 and then go to the I-900 hearing, whereas there's a 2-hour break. Unless you're like Senator Short and you come all the way from Eastern Washington. A lot of times people leave during the 2-hour break and go back home. So the thought was to leave enough time for lunch, but try to make it so maybe more people could go to the I-900 hearing if they wanted to. I mean, it's not required, obviously. Are there any questions from anybody on the proposed schedule? Okay. I think that's good. Thank you, Marilyn. I think we can go to the alternative public works. We don't have to vote on that, do we, Keenan? There's nothing to vote on around the schedule, right? Yeah. So we're just letting everybody know. The alternative public works contracting procedures sunset review preliminary report. I think we'll have, it's Aaron and Melanie from JLARC staff, I think is going to do their preliminary report today. And just as normal, like people, I think it always works better if people ask questions as we go. I think it's, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please do some sort of wave or something. We'll figure it out and we'll call on you. Go ahead, Tony and Aaron, you can start whenever you're ready, please.
Okay, can you see the presentation and can you hear me?
Both.
All right, great. Okay, So good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Melanie Stidham, and I'm joined by my colleague, Erin Cavan. We are presenting the preliminary report on the sunset review of the alternative public works contracting procedures. The legislative auditor has concluded that the legislature should continue the alternative public works contracting statute. The alternative public work methods are widely used, and the Capital Projects Advisory Review Board, or CPARB, has created a forum for stakeholders to continually improve project delivery. Public works are construction projects that are completed by public bodies, such as cities, school districts, universities, or ports. Some examples include new construction of buildings or port facilities, or renovations of historic buildings. Traditionally, these have all been built through a single contracting method called design, bid, build. Since the 1990s, use of alternative delivery methods have become an increasingly common and accepted practice across the country. And the federal government now allows use by federal agencies across the country, and states vary in how much use is allowed, but at least some use is authorized in all states. Washington's first use of an alternative procedure was in 1991 by the Department of Corrections. And in 1994, the legislature expanded that authority to a few other public bodies on a trial basis. And use has been continually expanded with different repeal and/or sunset dates since then. The Alternative Public Works Contracting Statute is codified in RCW 3910 and has three main components. It establishes the Capital Projects Advisory Review Board, or CPARB, to advise the legislature. Within CPARB, it created the Project Review Committee, or the PRC, to make decisions on public bodies' use of alternative methods. And then the Department of Enterprise Services provides staff support to CPARB and the PRC. RCW also includes three alternative delivery methods, and these are called design build, general contractor, construction manager, which is abbreviated GCCM, and job order contracting, which is sometimes called JOC. This is actually the second sunset review that our office has done of RCW 3910. The first one was in 2012. And as with the first review, the entire sunset is, the entire statute is subject to sunset, including all the procedures, CPARB and the PRC. And the current sunset date is June 30th, 2021.
How long, Melanie, is it between when we extended it last time? How long did it get extended for?
I think it was 7 years.
7 years, okay.
So with that brief overview, here's what we will cover in the rest of the presentation. First, we'll explain some of the key differences between the methods and share some of the key benefits that we heard from stakeholders. Next, we'll talk about how CPARB, the PRC, and the Department of Enterprise Services are doing with meeting their statutory responsibilities. We'll then provide an update on what CPARB has done to implement recommendations that were in the last review. And finally, we will answer questions that are asked in the Sunset Act. So I'll start with the methods themselves. There are several key differences between traditional and alternative contracting methods. And the first that we'll cover is how the contractor that is going to build the project is selected. In the traditional method of public works contracting, the public body is required to select the construction contractor that has the lowest responsible bid. While alternative public works contracting methods involve some price factors during the contract solicitation, their main focus is on the contractor's qualifications to complete the project. And the process is still competitive and public, and all public bodies must comply with prevailing wage laws and other public works requirements regardless of the contracting method that they use. All public works projects have three basic steps, and these are the planning, design, and construction. In the traditional contracting method, each of these phases is distinct. And so the construction contractor is selected after the design has been completed by an architect or engineering firm. And the contractor's bid price is the construction cost, and any changes that come up during construction result in change orders. When GCCM is used, the public body is authorized to select the contractor while the design is underway, and often this is very early in the design process. This allows the contractor to provide input on the design, including constructability and cost of various design options. The cost of the construction is set once the design is at least 90% complete. And once the construction begins, the general contractor is required to contract the majority of the work, and the subcontractors are selected on the lowest responsible bid. In design build, the public body holds a single contract with a design builder, and the design builder is a team between a construction firm and a design firm. As with GCCM, the cost for the project is established once the design is at least partially complete. And a key difference between different forms of design build is when that cost is established. Unlike GCCM, there is no requirement on the amount of work to be subcontracted or the method of selecting those subcontractors. The third method of alternative contracting, job order contracting, this is for smaller projects. The public body selects a job order contractor to perform an undefined quantity of work over a period of 2 to 3 years. As with other alternative delivery methods, the contractor is selected based on the qualifications and price factors. JLARC staff conducted 40 interviews with stakeholders, including public bodies and designers and contractors and experts over the course of our review. And these stakeholders reported a number of advantages to using alternative delivery methods for large construction projects. The most commonly cited advantage was bringing the contractor on during the design of the project. And this enables the designer to draw on the contractor's expertise, identify potential design problems, and propose different solutions. Stakeholders report that this is particularly valuable on large, complex projects that have unknown risks. This early involvement contributed to other advantages, such as reduced conflict and change orders during construction, and increased opportunities for positive working relationships and teamwork. The other frequently mentioned advantages that we heard can be seen on this slide. With that, I will turn it over to Aaron.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Great, thanks. So now that Melanie has provided an overview of the methods, I will discuss the actions of CPARB, the PRC, and their staff support. So statute established CPARB to evaluate public works contracting and provide policy advice to the legislature. And CPARB has 19 voting members, 15 of whom are appointed by the governor, and 4 of whom are appointed by other bodies, such as the Washington State Association of Counties. And CPARB also has 4 non-voting members who are appointed by each major caucus. CPARB has also engaged a large number of stakeholders in its work. CPARB is authorized by statute to form committees as needed, and there are currently 11 committees that address various issues in public works contracting. So committee members include representatives from 29 private businesses, 19 public bodies or public owner associations, 4 labor organizations, and 3 private associations. Statute directs CPARB to develop and recommend policies to enhance the quality, efficiency, and accountability of public works construction. And since our last review, since 2013, CPARB has developed and recommended 5 bills, and 2 additional bills were introduced based on CPARB's work. And altogether, 5 bills were enacted into law. One example of a policy change brought by these bills is allowing public bodies to use GCCM on heavy civil infrastructure projects such as sewers, roads, bridges, and tunnels. CPARB has also studied and shared information about public works. For example, CPARB is currently working on a study on local government public works contracting, which was requested by ESSB 5418.
Senator Mullet, I think Senator Hasagawa has a question.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Going back to the stakeholder opinions piece from the previous speaker, how curious, do stakeholders include the contractors and subcontractors? And if so, did you specifically interview any certified minority-owned business enterprises?
We did not. We selected the contract. We did speak with contractors and architects, and we picked them through a case study approach where we reviewed some projects that were completed by certified public bodies, which Aaron will explain a little bit more in a few minutes, and some with entities that had just done a project approval. And so those particular contractors and architects were not certified women or minority-owned businesses. However, we did talk to all of them about their processes for how they did outreach and how that they tried to engage subcontractors.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's an area. I serve on the CPAR board as the Senate appointee, Senate Democratic Caucus appointee, and that's been one of my major efforts, was to try and bring more equity into these processes. They're good processes, but they still have not panned out as beneficial to those certified minority business enterprises and women-owned business enterprises. So just wanted to make sure that was on the table.
Yeah, that was something that we did cover in our review. We note and observed a lot of processes within CPARB and on the PRC where all public bodies are asked about their processes. And I know that this is an ongoing interest of CPARB. They have a subcommittee, as you know, that's working on this. And so it is of interest for sure.
Thank you.
I'll also add, with our stakeholder interviews, we reached out to all the contractors on the sample that Melanie mentioned. And one of the contractors is not certified by the Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprises, but it is certified by an independent organization as a Native American owned business. Unfortunately, however, that business, we contacted them several times, but never got back to us, I think because of the COVID closures and so on.
Thank you.
All right, so one of CPARB's committees, as we mentioned, is the Project Review Committee. And statute directs the PRC to make decisions on applications from public owners that want to use design build and GCCM. And the PRC's members are appointed by CPARB, and they represent a wide variety of public bodies, including cities, counties, higher education, and more, and industry stakeholders, including construction managers, trades, and other industry participants. And CPARB has a process in place to appoint members to the PRC that have experience in alternative contracting methods. We found that the PRC maintains a thorough process for approving projects and certifying public bodies, and the entire process is public. There's a public application, a public meeting to evaluate the application, a presentation. There are opportunities for comment from members of the public, and a deliberation and public vote. Public bodies may request approval for an individual project, or they may seek certification to use the methods at their own discretion for a period of 3 years if they expect to complete a large volume of alternative public works projects during that time period. Examples of public bodies that have sought certification include the Department of Enterprise Services, the University of Washington, and Sound Transit. For all applications, the PRC evaluates whether applicants have the capacity and experience to use alternative contracting methods successfully, and whether they have resolved any previous audit findings. For project applicants, the PRC also evaluates whether the project meets statutory criteria for using alternative methods. For example, the statute lists certain situations in which a public body may use GCCM, such as a construction project at a location that will be occupied or operational during construction, such as a school or hospital. Applicants must also demonstrate that using design build or GCCM will provide a substantial fiscal benefit, or that the traditional delivery method is not practical. For certification, a public body must also demonstrate success in managing both traditional and alternative public works projects, and the necessary experience to determine when it is appropriate to use an alternative contracting method versus a design bid build method. If the PRC approves the application, the public body may use the alternative method on the project, and the certified public body may use the alternative methods on as many projects as they complete over the next 3 years. After approval, the public body is responsible for complying with statute. The PRC has no ongoing role in monitoring the project during construction, and this is similar to traditional public works contracting. Since 2013, the PRC has approved 179 projects and 38 certifications or recertifications. And this map shows the locations of the public bodies that have received project approval in the blue dots, and the public bodies that have received certification, which are the kind of golden circles. And there may be more than one public body at each of those locations. Altogether, more than $23 billion of projects have been approved by the PRC or reported to it by certified public bodies since 2013. And as you can see here, school districts make up the largest share with more than $7 billion worth of projects, followed by transit authorities and universities. Among the alternative methods, GCCM, which is shown here in the kind of dark blue color, makes up the largest share, although some public bodies are starting to use design build more frequently, particularly universities. As Melanie mentioned, statute directs the Department of Enterprise Services to provide staff support to CPARB. And during our review, we noticed some gaps in data collection and record keeping. The first I will mention relates to the Open Public Meetings Act. The Open Public Meetings Act requires that all public bodies and committees deliberate and take actions in public. Schedules must be published in advance, agendas must be posted online, and meeting minutes must be recorded and made available. CPARB and the PRC are taking action in public, and as I just described, the entire PRC process is public. However, some practices are not compliant with the Open Public Meetings Act. For example, PRC meeting minutes have not been consistently recorded or made available since 2017, and some CPARB committees have not posted agendas or recorded meeting minutes. CPARB and the PRC and DES are aware of these issues and have stated that they intend to address them. We also noticed some gaps with the job order contracting reporting. Statute requires public bodies that use job order contracting to report the following metrics to CPARB each year: a list of work orders issued, the cost of each work order, a list of subcontractors hired under each work order, and additional information that is requested by CPARB. DES staff are responsible for collecting the reports and summarizing them for CPARB, and there have been gaps in data collection and reporting and record keeping, including missing reports and incomplete or inaccurate reports. And even if all the reports were complete, CPARB does not use much of the data collected. With effort, the data could be used to monitor public bodies for compliance with job order contracting requirements, but statute does not direct CPARB to monitor for compliance, and so far CPARB has indicated it has not had the staff capacity or an interest in that kind of oversight. Overall, the statutory reporting requirements may not align with CPARB's primary duties of providing policy advice and recommendations to the legislature. Next, I will briefly discuss CPARB's implementation of the recommendations from the previous Sunset Review. So during the first review, the legislative auditor recommended reauthorizing RCW 3910 and made 3 recommendations to CPARB. The first recommendation was for CPARB to refocus its data collection and collect information that would best help it evaluate public works delivery methods, and CPARB has done so. The second recommendation was for public bodies to collect information and report it to CPARB in order to document compliance with statutory limits on GCCM subcontractor awards and payments. Public bodies that we reviewed are collecting this information and submitting it to CPARB through the PRC review process. The third recommendation was to revise job order contracting reporting in order to reduce the appearance of non-compliance with statutory limits on the number of contracts and maximum contract and work amounts, and CPARB has not done so. As a result, the reporting can continue to give the appearance of non-compliance, and the legislative auditor has a recommendation related to the reporting for job order contracting that I will discuss in just a moment. Finally, I will briefly discuss the questions laid out in the Sunset Act.
Oh, Representative Fye has a question. I'm sorry. I didn't see it. Go ahead, please, Representative Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go back to that slide that you showed on the who uses the systems participation slide.
With the billions on it, Aaron?
Yeah. And my question was if there was any particular reason why state agencies other than universities aren't using this. Because they seem to be the lowest number there.
Well, the primary state agency that uses this is the Department of Enterprise Services that uses these procedures for a variety of state agencies that they have responsibility for doing construction projects for. For example, DES used the design build procedure on the Helen Summers building that JLARC's offices, staff offices are in. And then there are a number of other public body types that are kind of clustered in the other category. So there's actually several other categories of public body that are using these procedures in much smaller amounts, but because the amounts got to be so small, we kind of just bundled those up into another category. So those would be park districts and various other sorts of public bodies. So we don't mean to imply that state agencies are the smallest users, but amongst these larger users here, yeah, that they use them less than public facility districts and so on.
Is it that they're not billing anything?
I'm sorry, can you say it one more time, please?
Is it that they're not billing anything?
No. I want to add a little bit something, if that's okay, Aaron.
Yeah, go ahead.
With some of this data this is data reported to the PRC in applications. And so some of the certified bodies, which for instance, DES would be one of them, they have a lot of projects that they might include in their application that we tried to extract to put into a table that's included in the appendix of the report. But some report projects that they may have included in their application, we couldn't include in our table because they didn't have date information and we were trying to limit on the dates. So this is not necessarily a comprehensive look. And it also mainly includes projects that are, I guess the main point being is that they are definitely using the procedures.
Representative.
To Representative Fai's point, when we conclude our presentation, Chair Millett, if DES has any insight into state agency use that they want to pass along, we have Representative Fair from.
Yeah, we'll definitely, Representative Fai, we'll have DES answer at the end, kind of explain. Representative Kraft, did you have a question?
I do quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a follow-on on that, I was also curious, what exactly is the criteria for an agency or entity to utilize the PRC? I mean, is it strictly GCCM and design build, all of those type of projects, or what's the criteria for PRC being part of the process?
Yeah, so all public bodies are eligible to apply to use these procedures, and for almost all public bodies to use GCCM or design build, they need to receive approval from the PRC. Now, and this kind of relates back to Representative Fai's question. One major public state agency that does not have to apply to the PRC to use design build is the Department of Transportation. So WashDOT has its own separate statutory authority to use design build. And so they do a large number of design build projects, but they don't need to apply to the PRC to use design build, and they don't report to that use to the PRC or to CPARB. But other than that, and a few other kind of smaller separate mentions in statute for public bodies to use these procedures on their own authority, all public bodies have to receive approval from PRC. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, you guys can finish up, Aaron and Millen.
Okay. So the Sunset Act identifies certain questions for conducting sunset reviews, and we have adapted them to RCW 3910 So first, has the use of RCW 3910 complied with legislative intent? Yes. CPARB engages stakeholders to make improvements to public works contracting, and the PRC maintains a thorough process to make decisions on applications to use design build and GCCM. Second, does the alternative process provide for efficient and economical public works construction with adequate cost controls in place? Yes. Stakeholders report that alternative contracting methods enable cost and schedule efficiencies, and they help public bodies identify and assess risk earlier in the project and mitigate those risks more effectively. Third, has CPARB achieved expected performance measures? Yes, CPARB has achieved its performance measures, which address its statutory authority and the sunset questions. For example, CPARB has recommended policy changes to the legislature and submitted requested reports. Fourth, what would be the effect of termination? If RCW 3910 were terminated, then CPARB and the PRC would be terminated, and public bodies would not be able to use design build, GCCM, or job order contracting unless granted their own separate statutory authority, such as WSDOT. Stakeholders that we interviewed opposed termination. They reported that termination would likely lead to more disputes, more lawsuits, more change orders, more design and construction uncertainty, greater risk exposure, slower construction, and more expensive or lower quality projects.
Representative Paulette, you have a question?
Until we're done, I'm just raising my hand.
Oh, you're waiting until they're finished? Is that what you said, Representative Paulette?
Yes, I already muted.
Oh.
Yes, I'll wait till they're finished.
Okay, go ahead, Aaron.
Okay. The legislative auditor makes two recommendations. First, the legislature should continue the alternative contracting methods in RCW 3910, and CPARB should evaluate which job order contracting data it needs to perform its functions and propose appropriate modifications to the legislature. As I noted, public bodies must report substantial information to CPARB, but there are gaps in data collection, and the required data may not align with CPARB's duties or interests. This completes our presentation of our preliminary report. We will present our final report in December, and the full report is available on our website. Our contact information is available here, and we are happy to answer any questions, and representatives from CPARB and DES are here as well.
Representative Paulette, why don't you go first, and then we'll have Bill from DES answer Representative Fye's question.
Thank you, and it'll be helpful for CPARB to join in answering when they have a chance to my question. My first question, which is,
we have Rebecca from CPARB is here.
Okay. I have two questions. The first is if you could explain how this report that in legislative audit relates to the legislative request of CPARB to do a review of local government procurements, policies, thresholds, and that includes a review of whether we need to clarify language in regard to the ability of agencies to use something other than least cost bidding in their contract qualifications and award of contracts. So if you could describe if the relationship, because I know there are probably a lot of people perhaps watching who are wondering what is the relationship between this JLARC review and the upcoming report done by CPARB to the legislature.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry. Or should we have Aaron? Do you want to, Representative Black? Do you want Aaron to answer that, or Rebecca from CPARB to answer that?
I think it would be helpful to have both, or whoever you'd like, however they like to coordinate with between the JLARC staff and CPARB would be great.
Okay. How about I'll start off, and then Rebecca, you can continue afterwards. So that study was requested in ESSB 5418 last year in 2019, and it directed CPARB to conduct an evaluation of local government contracting, looking at the small works roster and the limited public works process and the various thresholds for procurement for a wide variety of local governments. And the issue is that there's a lot of different kind of bid thresholds or project thresholds for different types of governments, such as cities and ports and so on. Now, those procedures, the small works roster and the limited public works process, are for small projects, kind of like job order contracting. But they rely, the awards go to the bids that are the lowest responsive bid from a responsible bidder. Job order contracting in RCW 3910, on the other hand, goes to the selection of the contractors made based on qualifications as well as price factors. So it's a different award process. And so for our review, we were reviewing all of the contracting methods in RCW 3910, and so that didn't include the small works roster or the limited public works process. But we did, as part of this review, we looked at CPARB's actions to implement any directions from the legislature, including legislatively requested studies. So we are aware that CPARB is working on that study, and Rebecca and probably Bill Frary from DES would probably be able to speak to the current status of that report.
Sure, and thank you so much for having us here today and for your time. I know how busy all of you are, and I appreciate the attention to alternative public works. I appreciate the fact that Bill Frary is here, and DES has been helping us to lead up the study. There are sort of two components. There's a collection and analysis component that was very challenging for us to do without assistance. So we really appreciate the availability of funding from DES to contract with MRSC to provide us with some of the data background. And that piece of the work has been done and has resulted in some recommendations that a committee has been reviewing for CPARB, and CPARB will actually be discussing and looking at those recommendations regarding increasing efficiency and addressing bid limits, which I think was one of the requests of that report. And we will be discussing that at our October 8th meeting and hopefully taking action to get that finalized into the legislature by the end of the year. Bill, I don't know if I missed anything or if there's anything you care to add.
I think you hit everything. I don't have anything to add.
I guess, Bill, before we go to Senator Short's question, can you address Representative Fai's question, I guess, around DES? Like, are they taking full advantage of the statute, or I guess his point was, of the $1 billion, I guess, the DES did in the last 7 years, how much of it were they utilizing this statute? Like, that wasn't clear from their graph, I guess. It just said that you guys had done $1 billion worth. It just wasn't clear at it. What's the size of the pot, I guess?
You bet. So DES manages every biennium about $500 million in project costs, and not all of that is construction costs. So there's considerable amount of money that goes through DES in that regard. Since the last review period, 2013, DES was a slow adopter, if you will, of the design, build, and GCCM practices. And that was that had a lot to do with hesitancy amongst our client agencies to move to more of a qualifications-based selection processes for our contractors rather than a solid bid. They were trying to be fiscally conservative and maintain, that competitive process, and not really understanding the benefits that came through with GCCM and design build. But over the last 4 years, we've really ramped up our use of design build and GCCM. A number of these projects have been quite small, 2 million, 3 million. That doesn't add up very fast. Most of the projects that we've done are for the community colleges. Those are generally somewhere between $20 and $35 million, which doesn't compare to like the universities who are doing $100 million project at a time. So yes, we are using the processes more and more. The Capitol Campus Child Care Center is an example of a progressive design build process that or contract that is underway right now. So does that answer the question? Kind of a slow starter and now fully in the swing of things?
Okay, let's go to Senator Short, and then we'll go back to Representative Paulette, and then we're going to try to keep moving on to our next one after that. But go ahead, Senator Short.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add really quickly on 5918, it went through Senator Tacos and my committee, local government, and I think Rebecca explained it really well. And one of the reasons we were looking at that, because we had every individual entity, wanting their own authority to establish, what thresholds they would use for the contracting. So it seemed like it was a good idea to have that kind of review, and appreciate CPARP working on that. My question is, with the changes that may need to be necessary in the reauthorization of the statute in terms of the job order contracting, is that something that CPARP's going to be bringing to the legislature? Or is that just something that we should look at on our own?
I can speak to that if you would like, Senator.
Yeah, please.
Okay. It became apparent through the JLARC process, which we appreciate on CPARP, I think, that there was this disconnect between the recommended JOC data. And so to try and make it simple, the compliance piece that the data would be measuring is if you can do a certain $4 million in a contract year, are you exceeding that amount? But the statute was lining it up with a calendar year. So the two periods of time didn't sync up. And what CPARP realized through this process is that we wouldn't be able to go do anything with an agency that exceeded its threshold anyway. And so what we're doing is recommending in the bill that public bodies be responsible for maintaining that information to demonstrate compliance, and that they make that information available upon request. And we have incorporated those changes into what we hope will be the approved bill that goes forward.
Okay, Representative Paulette.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking the JLARC staff for a great report and a great report out, and for DES and CPARP's collaboration and participation today. On the issue of design build, I happen to have a lot of familiarity with U.S. Government Accountability Office and DCAA, Defense Contract Audit Agency, reviews of design build projects at the federal level. And there's very strong criteria that they review, which is summarized in a GAO report as an approach best suited for well-defined and less complex projects. And I'm wondering if the JLARC review looked at whether or not that type of criteria is explicitly applied in the approval process for design build.
Aaron or Melanie?
Yeah. So statute identifies criteria for design build that is different from the criteria that you were just mentioning now, Representative Paulette. And the criteria in RCW 30 and 10 are a little bit more open-ended in that regard. And it's possible to use design build on projects that are more complex. And as far as all the individual criteria themselves, we can provide those to you if you'd like to see them. When it comes to evaluating those the applications, it's up to the project review committee to ensure that the applicants comply with that criteria, or that the public body is capable of ensuring that its projects meet those criteria when it seeks certification, or if it seeks to be recertified, that it has complied with those criteria in the past.
Representative Kraft. Oh, go ahead, Melanie. Did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we, in our review, we did observe the PRC process, and we talked to the chair, and we reviewed the materials that they use. So they have a checklist that they're using that's publicly available, but that they use during their meeting to make sure that all statutory criteria are being met, and that the project is meeting these evaluation criteria that are on the slide. They have a checklist that they go through, and they ask questions to ensure that the public body is aware of criteria and are following them. And so those are the processes that we reviewed that are in statute.
Okay, let's go to Representative Kraft, and then we'll move on to the State Patrol. Go ahead, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, and I appreciate the overview. This is a nice, helpful summary of the process. I wanted to just touch on the bill ESSSB 5418, and Senator Short referenced it, and Representative Paulette. And I know that this obviously is not a study of that, but I guess my question is, you know, in that bill and that process that's taking place for the small works projects and the bid thresholds, the dollar amount specifically, and what, you know, those appropriate amounts should be. Did you, as you did this overview, look at any amount thresholds, as in, are there certain amount thresholds that typically will fall to more of a traditional bid model or contract model versus like the alternative? Obviously, the larger they get, I would imagine they're moving to more of an alternative or design build method, but just kind of, because that's one of the big pieces, right, with the dollar amounts and what qualifies as small works, or, you know, what amount is what type of project in a definition sense, and then therefore what process should follow. So I guess my question is, you know, the dollar amounts, how much did that play into your overview on this?
Yeah, so we, the statute identifies certain thresholds for each of these methods, and currently job order contracting, the threshold there is $500,000. And that is a recent change. It was in the past $350,000 until legislation last year. And we looked at the job order contracting reporting that we had available, and all of the projects that we examined were less than that $350,000 amount. But within that amount, they ranged from $10,000 up until just about $350,000. So it was all variety of projects within that realm. And then for design build and GCCM, those in the past have had statutory minimum amounts, and design build still does that. The project must be at least $2 million in order to use design build. And GCCM, and at different times in the past, has been at least $10 million and other amounts. And those projects, even without those thresholds, tend to be much larger projects. The average project size in our data set that we were looking at for projects since 2013 was about $70 million for a design build or a GCCM project. So they tend to be much larger projects regardless of any kind of threshold. And we did look at data collected by the Department of Labor and Industries on all projects that are reported to Labor and Industries from public bodies, and the vast majority of them tend to be much smaller projects. So something like 95% tend to be less than $5 million. So the design build and GCCM tend to be used for the small percentage of projects that are much larger.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I guess, Rebecca, before we move on, is CPARB going to be bringing forward the bill to extend so it doesn't sunset? And then are they just keeping it around indefinitely? Or are they doing another like 7-year extension, or what's the plan, I guess, so the committee knows?
That's a great question. And I just wanted to make sure that I gave a shout out of appreciation to Senator Hasagawa, who's also on CPARB. And as he is aware, CPARB has developed a bill. We've extensively worked on it for over a year now with stakeholder outreach and input, and we will be bringing forward a draft bill that we hope to be able to circulate within the next month after the October 8th CPARB meeting that does make some additional tweaks that stakeholders felt were important for the legislation. And with respect to your question about the sunset review and will it go indefinitely, stakeholder consensus was strongly in support of continuing the reauthorization process and the JLARC review process. However, the committee recommended a 10-year period as opposed to a 7-year period.
Okay.
Hope that answers everything.
And so it sounds like we can all reach out to Senator Hasagawa on the Senate side, and he'll have a House buddy on the House side, and we'll keep our eyes out for that bill. It sounds like it's a program that we don't want to see go away based on JLARC's analysis. So, okay, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it. We're going to go on to the Washington State Patrol Vehicle Replacement Proposed Final Report. You know, this is going to be Zach and Josh from JLARC staff, and we do have State Patrol here and OFM who can make comments. And this is the one that we heard in July, but this is the final. So a motion will be in order after this report to distribute. So why don't we go ahead? Zach or Josh, whenever you're ready, we can see your.
Good morning, Chair Mollett and members of the committee. I am Zach Freeman, and Josh Karras and I are staff to the committee. We are here today to present the proposed final report for the Washington State Patrol Vehicle Replacement Study. As a reminder, we presented the preliminary report to you back in July, and the report we are presenting today includes responses from the State Patrol and OFM. The legislative auditor's conclusion for this study was that the Washington State Patrol continues to use a vehicle life cycle cost model, but it is not following best practices. Vehicle replacement decisions should be based on a revised analysis and also consider other important factors. As a reminder, the legislative auditor issued 3 recommendations for the State Patrol to follow best practices for life cycle cost analysis. The recommendations, which are shown here, cover topics such as data reliability, documentation of procedures, and communication with the legislature. Both the State Patrol and OFM have concurred with these recommendations, which we will discuss in more detail later in the presentation. This study came to us in the 2019-2021 transportation budget that directed JLARC to update its 1999 study of this Washington State Patrol's pursuit vehicle life cycle cost model. Like the preliminary, we will split the remainder of this presentation into 2 parts. First, I'll review the agency's fleet budget and current practices for conducting life cycle cost analysis. Josh will then discuss the changes that we made to the life cycle cost model, as well as our updated replacement target. For the 2019-2021 biennium, the State Patrol planned to purchase 240 pursuit vehicles, which was the estimated number of vehicles needed to cover vehicles lost due to high mileage, vehicles lost due to collision, and vehicles for the incoming cadet class. The average acquisition cost for the 2019-2021 biennium was around $55,000 per vehicle, which included a purchase price of just under $43,000 and another $12,000 in parts and equipment. The 2019-2021 pursuit vehicle budget included $13.3 million to purchase and equip those 240 vehicles, and another $14.4 million for maintenance and operations. The State Patrol uses a life cycle cost model that considers both capital and operating costs to determine the optimal time to replace its pursuit fleet. Operating costs per mile increase over time as vehicles become more expensive to maintain. Conversely, capital costs per mile decrease over time as the upfront acquisition cost is spread over additional miles. And the optimal time to replace a pursuit vehicle is where total costs per mile are lowest, as shown by this shaded box. Replacing vehicles in this mileage range represents the lowest cost to the agency. Based on analysis completed for the 2019-2021 biennium, the State Patrol's current replacement target is 110,000 miles. In practice, the average replacement mileage over the past 2 years has been around 118,000. And as a note, the State Patrol only uses life cycle cost analysis to determine the replacement targets for its primary pursuit vehicle, which is the Ford Interceptor. Replacement targets for other vehicle types are set based on professional experience or input from other agencies. For example, the replacement target for the agency's pursuit motorcycle is 65,000 miles. JLX staff reviewed the last 6 iterations of the life cycle cost model, going back to the 2009-2011 biennium, and identified 4 areas where the State Patrol is not following best practices for life cycle cost analysis. The first area covers data reliability. The State Patrol provides limited oversight of the vehicle maintenance data entered by its staff, resulting in unreliable and at times incomplete information. We also found that the most recent version of the life cycle cost model lacked consistency and standardization. For example, we found that many of the original formulas in the model had been replaced with hard-coded values, while an inadvertent modeling error caused the model to identify 110,000 miles as the optimum replacement target, even if there were potentially lower cost options available at higher mileages. Next, we found insufficient documentation of the methods and assumptions used to complete the analysis for the 2019-2021 biennium. And we also found that the State Patrol failed to simply and clearly communicate the results of its analysis with the legislature. These findings led to 3 legislative auditor recommendations related to best practices. First, the State Patrol should improve the procedures and data systems it uses to collect and track vehicle maintenance data. Second, the State Patrol should establish and document procedures for conducting life cycle cost analysis each biennium. And third, the State Patrol should provide the legislature with additional information on its life cycle cost analysis and pursuit vehicle budget when it submits its biennial budget request. And as I mentioned, both OFM and the State Patrol have concurred with these recommendations. I will now pass control to Josh to discuss the changes that we made to the model and our updated replacement target.
As Zach mentioned, we updated the State Patrol's current life cycle cost model and identified a new replacement target for the next biennium. The updates we made to the model include aligning the model to available data. This includes removing elements from the model that the State Patrol did not collect data on in their maintenance data, and including DES's resale data to estimate the depreciation of the Ford Interceptor. We use statistical models to estimate maintenance costs at high mileages and average yearly depreciation. And we incorporated best practices into the model, which include discounting all future costs to their present value and incorporating a margin of error, which accounts for potential error introduced by our models. We found an optimal replacement range from 130 to 175,000 miles, where life cycle costs per mile are statistically equivalent. For 175,000 is the mileage with the lowest life cycle cost at 68 cents, and 130,000 is the lowest mileage within the 1% margin of error, and that's 69.3 cents. That means it costs the same per mile to purchase, operate, and replace vehicles within this range. If the State Patrol changed their replacement targets, it could have a modest impact on the annual cost of the pursuit fleet. We estimated the annual cost using the outputs from our updated life cycle cost model, a fleet size of 700 vehicles, and that the vehicles drive 25,000 miles per year. Shifting from the replacement target of 175,000 miles to 130,000 miles would increase costs by roughly $200,000 per year, and this is within our margin of error. Shifting from the State Patrol's current replacement target of 110,000 miles to the lower end of the replacement range, 130,000 miles, would reduce fleet costs by roughly $400,000 per year. During our research, we found several additional factors outside of the life cycle cost model that could also impact the replacement target. For costs, we found the State Patrol may need to purchase more backup pool vehicles to maintain fleet operations. Our analysis showed that vehicles had an increased likelihood of needing a high-cost repair at high mileages, and that the number of vehicles needed to maintain current fleet operations would increase. For costs, older vehicles lack new safety features and technologies found in current models. These technologies could also help make vehicles more efficient and reduce emissions. Additional information on other costs and non-cost factors we identified can be found in the report. All of these factors favor a lower replacement target, and the State Patrol may identify factors beyond these that impact the replacement target as well. With our analysis, we identified an optimal replacement target of 130,000 miles. This is based on our life cycle cost model, identifying a replacement range from 130 to 175,000 miles, and then choosing the lowest mileage within the optimal range, which minimizes the risks and costs associated with the factors that I just discussed that we were not able to include in the model. Future replacement targets for biennia beyond 2021-2023 are uncertain due to unknown future acquisition costs of the vehicles and changing discount rates. The full report has more detail on the sensitivity analysis we conducted and other variables that affect the replacement target. The URL here is a link to our website, which contains our full report. Our contact information is provided here, and this concludes our prepared remarks. Zach and I are happy to answer any questions, and the State Patrol and OFM have representatives present as well to answer any additional questions.
So I'm going to go ahead and we have Senator Wagner. Do you want to ask the question now, or do you want to have State Patrol come up, or do you want to ask for Zach or Josh?
I'd like to ask now.
Okay, go ahead.
So we're looking at mileage. Is there a rough idea of how many months or years that is at the 130, let's say?
Yeah, so in our analysis, based on State Patrol's data, we assumed that a vehicle is going around 25,000 miles per year. So we're looking at extending, their average replacement target right now is pretty close to, it's 118,000 miles. So this is really extending the vehicles by just like a couple of months.
Thank you.
Senator Taco.
Yeah, first I apologize for being late. I got hung up on another issue. But my question is, was there really any difference if you looked at different makes and models of vehicles that are used?
So we only studied their current pursuit vehicle, which, as I mentioned, is the Ford Interceptor. Through time, the State Patrol has used a variety of different vehicles, and they've done this analysis on a few different vehicles, and the maintenance profiles of those different vehicles are different, but we did not specifically look in the past to try to identify what those changes would have been for other vehicle types or any of the other vehicles that are currently in the State Patrol's fleet. This is really their primary vehicle, so that's what we focused on.
Okay, but I'm assuming when they choose their new car, it's probably one of the factors they use, I would assume, I guess. I know we can find out from them, I guess, when they come up. Representative Fye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to extend my appreciation to the work that was done. We knew that there needed to be an update, and obviously $400,000 may not be in the big picture of things a huge amount of money, but when you're 20% short going forward in your budget for the next biennium, every bit helps. So I appreciate your work.
Representative Burkott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last slide showed that you're using the lowest mileage within the optimum range. Why not use the highest, or why not use a middle number rather than the lowest mileage?
Josh, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, so it costs the same, or statistically the same per mile. And so over the life of the vehicle, it would cost statistically the same anywhere from 130 to roughly 235,000. And so to minimize the risks and other factors associated with non-cost, like non-life cycle costs, we figured it was best to take the lowest mileage within that range, given that it does cost statistically the same as any other point within that range.
And if I could just follow up on that, one of the, in addition to some of these factors, such as, the safety of the vehicle or the emissions, we have less data as we get out farther and farther into higher mileages. And so we felt more confident also in losing a mileage that is lower because there's just very limited experience with operating these vehicles at or beyond, say, 140, 150,000 miles.
Okay, let's go ahead and call up. We have Walter Hamilton from the Washington State Patrol, Bob Mackey from the Washington State Patrol. Walter is their budget manager and Bob is their chief financial officer. And then we have Jenna Forty from OFM. And anybody who wants to make comments from that group, I don't care who goes first. You guys decide amongst yourselves, but go ahead. Walter, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. Walter Hamilton, Budget Manager, State Patrol. Over here in the conference room, socially distant, is Bob Mackey, our CFO, for questions. Want to thank J-Lark and the work that Mr. Konopaski's staff, especially Zach and Joss, did to update our model. Like you said, we concurred with their recommendations. It's been 16 years since this has been done, and we look forward to refining our processes and procedures to get the best product to the legislature going forward.
Thank you for that. Jenna, did you have any comments from OFM?
Yeah, thank you, Chair and committee. We just wanted to kind of echo what the State Patrol said. We'd like to thank everyone for the hard work that they did on this, and we're expecting to get this fully integrated and into the next 2022 supplemental is, I think, when we'll have it all into practice. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, excellent. If there's not any other questions for anybody from the committee, I would entertain a motion to approve the distribution of the Washington State Patrol Pursuit Vehicle Replacement Proposed Final Report.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve for distribution the report presented.
Representative Orcutt moves for approval. Representative Kiloff is seconded. I think we will once again utilize J-Lark staff to do a roll call of the votes.
Thank you. This is a roll call vote to approve for distribution the Washington State Patrol Pursuit Vehicle Replacement Proposed Final Report. Representative Fye.
Aye.
Representative Frame. Senator Hasagawa.
Aye.
Representative Hoff, did he ever come on? Representative Kilduff.
Aye.
Representative Kraft.
Aye.
Senator Mullet.
Aye.
Representative Orcutt.
Aye.
Representative Paulette.
Aye.
Senator Saldana.
Aye.
Senator Short. Senator Short. Representative Stokesbury. Senator Taco.
Aye.
Senator Wilson.
I know Senator Wilson had to step off.
Okay.
So I think she had to log off, like we lost her 5 or 10 minutes ago.
Okay. Senator Wegener.
Aye.
So we have 11 ayes and 4 no votes. And so the ayes have it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. And,
Just for the record, for absences, I don't think we had any votes of no.
yeah, no.
I'm sorry, that's correct. It was all, those were, I didn't mean no votes. I mean, they did not vote.
And I think Representative Fye's point, the nice thing is, it seems like you can pick up $400,000 by basically using the vehicles an extra 6 months. And it seems like it's a good plan going forward. Okay, we're next going to do the 2019 lodging tax expenditures update. We're not voting on anything here. We just get a briefing every year of how lodging tax dollars being used. As Ashley Elliott will give us the staff presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ashley Elliott, and I'm staff to the committee, here to present an update to JLARC's lodging tax expenditures report. Normally, we report this in July. This year, due to current circumstances, we pushed it out until September. And just as a reminder, the lodging tax report is not an audit or an evaluation. It's a product of an ongoing data collection process. And our presentation will provide some background on this task and go over the information included in this year's update. So municipalities, meaning cities, towns, and county governments, have been required to report lodging tax expenditures to JLARC since 2013. And municipalities may collect a tax for lodging stays at hotels, motels, and similar facilities. Lodging tax was first introduced in King County in 1967, and over time, allowable expenditures have been expanded to include all tourism-related activities. In 2007, the legislature clarified the types of activities that could be funded by lodging tax revenue, and starting in 2013, municipalities were required to report this information about lodging tax expenditures to JLARC. So municipalities may distribute funds locally, and they report the data to JLARC. So municipalities may use lodging tax revenue to fund tourism-related activities such as events and festivals, marketing and promotion, and tourism-related facilities expenses. They may also distribute grants to local organizations for these activities. Statute requires municipalities to report this expenditure data to JLARC. And while JLARC provides guidance to municipalities about the data reporting process, we were not directed to evaluate or audit this information. So in 2019, 192 municipalities were reported spending $76.4 million in lodging tax revenue. This funded 1,646 tourism-related activities. Municipalities reported that 72.7 million people attended these activities and paid for 16.1 million lodging nights. 95% of the municipalities that were required to report or that received a lodging tax distribution in 2019 reported to JLARC. Just for comparison, here are 2018's numbers. And we would like to thank the Washington Association, the Association of Washington Cities and the Washington State Association of Counties for their help with outreach to municipalities.
So Ashley, do we have a sense on those numbers, going back to the chart, of how many of those attendees and paid lodging nights are people, like, let's say people going from Chelan or from King County to Chelan County versus people coming in from out of state to attend something? Or is that just a level of granularity we just don't get from the cities, or it's too hard for them to estimate?
For the attendance information, this is a rolled up number. We do collect, we do ask for how many are from like out of state, out of county, and then, or 50 plus miles, and then like out of state, out of country. So we do have a little bit more detail on where they're from. Not like if specifically, but if they're out of town or out of
detail, can you give us like a ballpark, like on some of these numbers are 10% or 20% coming from out of state, or is it hard, or is it just really hard to say right now?
I would have to look it up, and I'm happy to do that and send the information to you. We have the raw data, so I'll look it up and make sure you guys get that after this.
Thank you very much.
Our report on lodging tax is interactive, and I'm going to just open it up in 1 second and walk you through how to use it. We break down the data in a couple different ways for you. I'm going to walk through our activity-specific data tab here. All of this data is available in Tableau, and so it's interactive. And we laid out these dashboards very similarly, so you can navigate them the same. Over here on the left, you'll see all of the filters. So this is all of the data we've collected, and if you wanted to look just at 2019 or multiple years, you can select those and hit apply, and it will filter all of the data over here to that year. And the same goes with activity type, or in this case, if you wanted to look at just a couple municipalities, you would just select those and hit apply. And obviously there's more on this list if you scroll down. And you might have noticed some of these yellow highlighted fields. Those are fields that have been left blank by the municipality when they reported. And more information maybe on why those are blank would be here under our download the data tab. If you were to click this complete data link, it will download all of the raw data that JLARC has, and municipalities can provide comments on the data that they've entered, which might include information on why they didn't report something. This is an ongoing requirement, so we collect data annually from municipalities, and we plan on being back in July of 2021 to present the 2020 update. Here's my contact information, and happy to answer any questions.
So actually, I know it wouldn't be practical to audit the entire universe, but has there ever been discussion about trying to audit like 5% of the return, just to get a sense? Like some of those numbers, when the like estimates are even round numbers, like 100 nights, like a lot of times I always, at least in my head, think, oh, it looks like that's a number that somebody's put in there. The odds of a number coming out to exactly a round even number like that are probably pretty low. Is there ever, I mean, what would have to happen to try to do an audit just of a fraction of the returns, just to get a sense of how accurate the information coming in or how they're generating it is, I guess?
Senator, I can probably help answer that. We haven't entertained that to date yet. As you were alluding to, obviously, auditing this whole scale, nearly 200 municipalities, that would be to give you an audit guarantee, that would be a significant effort. If doing anything where we did go in and audit, we would have to, we could probably look at some ideas of what would be involved, but we don't have anything on the work plan right now that dedicates resources to this. So Valerie and I can go back and look at some ideas and let you know, but we definitely, it would involve making a decision to shift some resources on something else in the work plan to expand the scope on this. But we'd be happy to come up with some options so that you could think about what's involved there, and if you wanted us to undertake something like that.
Okay. Any other questions for Ashley before we move on to the proposed study questions we have? Okay, I think Ashley, you're not going very far, right? You're just getting, I think Melanie's just joining you.
Yeah,
okay, so proposed study questions, we have roughly 40 minutes left. We have four reports, so if we kind of do about 9 minutes on each one, roughly, we should be out of here on time. The first one is the School Employees Benefits Board covered presentation with Ashley and Melanie.
Yes, so good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm once again Ashley Elliott, and I'm joined by my colleague Melanie Stidham, staff to the committee, and we are here to present the proposed study questions for the School Employees Benefit Board coverage. And unlike the other presentations that you've heard this morning, we are just in the beginning stages of this report. Our preliminary report is due to the committee in September of 2021. Up until December 31st, 2019, local school districts or qualifying school employees received healthcare benefits through their local school district. On January 1st, 2020, qualifying school district employees became eligible for healthcare benefits under a consolidated program called the School Employee Benefit Board, or SEB. And statute sets the eligibility threshold. Every school employee that works or is anticipated to work 630 hours per year is eligible for benefits. The state provides funding for employee health benefits to school districts through various funding models, and school employees also pay for a portion of these costs.
JLARC staff plan to explore 3 questions over the course of our review. And the first one is, how many school employees worked full-time and less than full-time during the 2018-2019 and then the 2019-2020 school years? And this includes types of jobs performed and the ranges of hours worked. The second question looks at the number of employees that were eligible for employer-sponsored benefits before and after STEP, including the number that waived their health benefits and the amount that each district paid for their eligible employees. And then finally, the third question looks at the amount of funding that the state provided to each district in the 2019-2020 school year for health benefits. And to the extent possible, we will look into how much of the funding is associated with different funding areas, such as special education and pupil transportation. As Ashley mentioned, we plan to publish our preliminary report in September 2021, and the proposed final will be in December of that year. And that concludes our prepared remarks, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
I guess one thing that came up in a Ways and Means hearing last year, I don't know how to get at this. I think at the end of this year, obviously, you're gonna have data of what's happening in the 21 calendar year versus what happened in the 2020 calendar year. And I think one of the questions was, like, when it comes to like job sharing, did job sharing kind of evaporate away because districts couldn't afford to provide full healthcare benefits for both job sharing teachers? And so does that mean like job sharing went away? The same, I think, on substitute teachers. I think they're trying to get a sense of our districts drawing a line of not letting a sub work the 630th hour. So therefore they have to go to a different district at that point if they want to get more hours than 630. Is there a way to get any sense if, or is it just, it's going to be too hard because we just won't have enough data in 2021 to go off of? Or what's your guys' thoughts?
So we're working on the data collection instrument right now that will, some of this data we're going to be getting directly from school districts. And we are thinking of asking them some of those questions directly, like how many employees within the data that they're reporting are a job share, so that we would be able to distinguish with the data, try to make sure that we're covering people who have multiple positions and job shares. So we are thinking of asking just how many of their classified and certificated employees are in job share situation. And then also with the limits up to 630 hours. So we're asking the question within ranges of hours. And so we're asking some questions that are pretty tight to that 630 threshold to try to see how many people are close to that. And then also just directly asking, do you have a policy that's keeping employees below that threshold? So these are things that we are testing currently.
We're going to do Representative Orcutt first, then Representative Pratt, and then Representative Follett. Representative Orcutt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 1920 school year got disrupted about 2/3 of the way or 3/4 of the way through. How are you communicating to school districts when you're asking for data to make sure that they're giving you projections of what those hours would have been had it not been for COVID shutdowns, so that we have an accurate depiction of what that is and can compare with the previous school year?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, COVID-19 kind of causes some complications in a number of fronts, and this is just one of many. So we are planning on, so the 2018-2019 school year is easy, relatively. And then 2019-2020 school year has some complications. So we're going to be asking for districts to report on the number of hours that were contracted, because that is expected, like, even if they alter the actual number of hours worked, but what was contracted should give an idea of what they expected. Then with the intermittent employees, with all those employees, then districts, if that employee had worked for the previous 2 years with that district, then they were required to do a 2-year look back on the number of hours that were worked to anticipate whether they were going to work that same number of hours in the 2019-2020 school year. And if they were anticipated to work that, then they would be eligible for benefits if they met that 630-hour threshold. So we're asking that. And then there's another group of employees that didn't have that 2-year look back that we won't have great data for, but we're going to also be asking how many there are so that we would know at least how many people are we talking about that we only have data really up until February 2020 on the number of hours that they worked.
Representative Kraft.
Representative Orcutt asked my question. I'm all set. Thank you.
That's why you lowered your hand. I like it. Hey, I love it when it works that way. Representative Paulette.
Thanks. Are you looking at the issue of, or plan to look at the issue of how districts divide the cost for substitute teachers that are employed by multiple districts, and how that, where those lines could be and how to make adjustments?
Yeah, that is another good question, and not something that we're planning on looking at, because with the health benefit eligibility, it is district dependent, as we're asking how much did the districts pay for their employees that were eligible for benefits. But if an employee worked in 2 districts and say they didn't meet the threshold in either one of those, or they only met it in one, then I guess the simple answer is we're asking each district to report on the employees within their district, and then we won't really be getting much information on the employees that maybe work in more than one district.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much. There's no other questions. Let's move on to the next one, which is going to be Rachel Murata talking about renewable energy program payments. Here's Rachel. Go ahead, whenever you're ready, Rachel. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Mullet, members of the committee. I'm Rachel Murata, staff to JLARC. This next presentation is also a study we are just beginning now. These are our proposed study questions for a tax super credit for renewable energy program payments.
You could sell that as like a Zoom background. That's kind of a cool picture you found.
So this preference offers a tax credit against the public utility tax for utilities that make payments to their customers through the Renewable Energy System Incentive Program. The way that program operates is utilities that choose to participate pay their customers for every kilowatt hour generated through the customer's equipment. So the customer, for instance, installs solar panels and starts generating power. The utility pays the customer a set amount based on the power generated. And then the state gives the utility a tax credit equal to the amount the utility has paid. The technologies that are eligible for the program are listed in statute, and they include solar panels, wind turbines, and anaerobic digesters. The program is administered by the Washington State University Energy Extension Program. This credit was created back in 2006. It was last amended in 2017 with the stated objective of encouraging installation of renewable energy systems. And that 2017 bill specifically directed the legislative auditor to conclude that the objective has been met if 2 things occur. The first is that 115 megawatts of solar capacity are installed. And the second is that the state sees an increase in solar jobs. And that increase could be either in the number of solar jobs or an improvement in the state's national ranking of jobs per capita. Over the course of this study, we'll seek to answer some questions about the credit's effectiveness. The first set of questions relate to program use. So how many entities are involved and how much tax are they saving? What kinds of systems are being installed and how much solar capacity is being added? There will also be questions about the program's impact. So how does the preference, how does this credit operate to incentivize installation? And what's the impact of that operation on which entities are getting involved and what types of systems are being installed? Has the credit caused an increase in renewable energy system installation? And then questions about the impact on the state's economy, revenue, and jobs. So what is the impact of this credit on the economy and the corresponding reduction in state tax revenue? How has employment changed in general? And specifically, how has the number and ranking of solar jobs changed as a result? We'll be back to present our preliminary report to you in July of 2021 and our proposed final report in December of 2021. Here's our contact info, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Rachel, are those payments, I thought they just finished, like the last one went out and like this summer. Is that program just expired or what is going on?
Technically, there are two separate programs. The credit applies to both. And so, yeah, one just finished at the end of June this year. The other will be continuing for several more years.
Representative Fye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In taking on from what the chair is pointed out, I think we had what I guess I'd call a flurry of activity to take advantage of the credit by consumers. And so I would be interested in, because I think that peak has occurred, and I would be interested in the longer term benefit that the incentive might have spurred in terms of activity, in terms of installation of systems beyond that peak of activity, and whether that's been maintained or how much has it's gone down in terms of the level of activity.
That's a great question. That's absolutely something we'll be looking into.
Senator Hasegawa.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I was just wondering if you have any kind of plan to do an equity analysis on who's benefiting from these credits, and whether or not people of less means or from disadvantaged communities are able to take advantage of.
That's a great question. That is something we hope to be able to look into if the data is available. Taking a look at who in the state is able to participate in the program.
Thank you, because I would like to see some sort of analysis on that.
Rachel, can you explain just really quickly, I guess, the program just expired this summer was one tranche. What's the difference between the two programs, the one that's still going? Is it just timing of when people install their panels?
The 2017 legislation created technically a new program, but the rate structure is different. So the amount that each customer is paid per kilowatt hour they generate is lower. The amount of time over which they're eligible is changed. Under the new program, it's a set number of years or until 50% of the cost of the program is recovered. Under the old program, anyone in the program could continue to receive payments until the program expired. And so there are a bunch of changes like that to the structure of the payments. But the credit to utilities is the part that hasn't changed.
Gotcha. So, okay, I'm trying to get a sense. Is the goal of the JLARC study to give the legislature information of whether they want to extend the program longer, or like I guess what's the end goal of the study to try to figure out?
Well, as with any of the tax preference review reviews, the legislative auditor will be required to recommend, continue or terminate the tax credit. This one's a little bit
already been terminated, basically.
The credit will continue through 2028.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Rachel? Boots has a question, but I'm not going to let her ask it. She's just barking. Okay. I think next we're going to do the manufacturer's deferral tax credit with Dana Lynn.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Can you see my screen?
We can see you.
You can see me. Uh-oh. Okay. Okay, let's try that. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet. I would offer assistance, but I suck at technology, so I would.
Well, I've already demonstrated my my skills. All right.
Dana, do you want to have Liz go ahead and just
sure. Yeah, no, I had this up, but it doesn't appear to be.
There we go. Geneva's got it going, I think.
Oh, we're up. Dana, you're good.
You just ask her to click through, right?
Okay, well, I had to close it and cause all sorts of trauma, but thank you for your patience, everyone. My name is Dana Lynn, the technically disadvantaged person on staff, and I am staff to your committee. Good morning. We're going to talk about another tax preference review study that we're just beginning. This is the proposed study questions for a sales and use tax deferral for manufacturers in the state. This program was originally enacted in 2015 and it's scheduled to expire January 1st, 2026. This particular program provides a sales and use tax deferral for up to $10 million for businesses to build new or expand current manufacturing facilities or to buy equipment or machinery for those facilities. And the program was established in 2015 as a limited pilot project. By that limited project, it was limited to just 5 projects statewide, and 2 of those had to be in Eastern Washington. Soon after that program began, the 5 slots filled up. And so the legislature came back 2 years later in 2017 and extended the program. Beginning in 2018, the program can now take on 2 new projects each calendar year. Again, a geographic component is at play. 1 project has to be in Eastern Washington and 1 has to be in Western Washington. And when businesses complete the construction, they start repaying the deferred sales tax over a 10-year period. And that period begins 5 years after the facility is deemed operationally complete by the Department of Revenue. Another component of this program is that the state portion of the sales tax that's repaid, 6.5%, is deposited into a special fund that was set up and is managed by the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. And that fund is to be used for job training and apprenticeship programs for the manufacturing industry. The program was stated to be intended to create and retain jobs in the state and to provide funding to support that job readiness training, professional development, and apprenticeships in manufacturing fields.
Dana, how much money is in that account now? Does that have a current balance?
It does. We're beginning our analysis, but we do know right now that there are no funds in the account because nobody has started the repayment.
Got it, because everyone's outside the 5 years hasn't passed.
Yeah, it's coming up soon. I believe the first repayments will begin in a year or 2. And we are calculating what we expect to be in the program, but to date, nothing.
But in terms of like, if we wanted money in that program to help with retraining the people in Everett at the Boeing plant, if it gets moved to South Carolina, at this point, there's nothing in there.
There's nothing there right now, correct.
Okay.
In a performance statement, you did state that if a review finds that each project generated at least 20 full-time jobs, and full-time jobs was defined to include construction jobs, then the legislative auditor should recommend extending their deferral program. Our review will address the following questions. How many Washington manufacturers are using the preference? And if it's not being used to the full extent, can we identify why that is? How many full-time jobs were generated by each project? And how many of those jobs are construction jobs?
We know off the top, are they doing the one project on each side of the state each year at least or not? It just Or you have
The detail that we have shows that it is not being utilized to its fullest extent. Yeah,
either side of the mountains utilizing it, or neither? Is there a geographic?
It is a mixed. There have been projects in Eastern and Western, but the 2 projects per year since 2018 haven't been used. In 2020, as far as we know currently, no one has applied for the program. The third question we'll try to answer is how much funding for job training has been provided to date, and what's the estimate for future funding? And finally, accounting for the repayment of deferred taxes, what are the estimated savings that will actually be realized by beneficiaries? We'll come back to you in July of next year with our preliminary report, and the proposed final report we'll present in December along with the other tax preference reviews. And that concludes my remarks this morning. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Is the recommended savings though? It's just a time value of money savings, right? Because
that's correct.
You're not actually getting. They're just getting a deferral of tax.
That's correct. It is an actual deferral. Some deferrals, as you know, end up being an actual exemption over time. This program is not structured that way. This does require the businesses to repay the monies. They have 5 years before they have to start repaying, and they have a 10-year period to repay, but the ultimate savings is the time value of money.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions for Dana before we do our last one? And that is going to be the newspaper industry. And that's Camille and Ashley. Not Ashley Elliott, Ashley Trinell.
Good morning, Chair Mullet and members of the committee. My name is Camille Hawkinson, and with me it's my colleague Ashley Trinell. We are staff to the committee. Today, we are here to present our proposed study questions for the tax preference review of the reduced B&O tax rate for newspapers.
Is that a current picture of the Seattle Times office?
It is. No, just kidding. It might be soon. This is the beginning stages of the study, and JLARC plans on returning in 2022 with a preliminary report. For some background, the newspaper industry's revenue has been declining in recent years, largely as a result of technological changes in the industry. For decades, the newspaper industry has received over 50% of their revenue from print advertising. With the advent of digital advertising, competition for selling advertising space has increased. 2 technology companies alone receive over 60% of total digital advertising revenue, decreasing market space for newspapers. As a result of changes in the advertising industry, print advertising was no longer the main revenue source for newspapers, and many newspapers sought new financial strategies. The legislature stated that they recognize the importance of the newspaper industry both to its citizens and to the workings of government. In 2009, the legislature enacted a tax preference that reduced the B&O tax rate for the newspaper industry. This tax reduction was intended to aid the industry through changes in technology and in revenue. This reduced tax rate is applied to the newspaper industry's gross receipts. Prior to the tax rate reduction, the newspaper industry had a B&O tax rate of 0.484%. The reduced B&O tax rate is 0.35%. This tax rate reduction is set to expire July 1st, 2024.
The definition of newspaper is based on form and frequency and includes both traditional print and online versions of print newspapers. It does not include online-only newspapers. The newspaper industry tends to bundle together both print and digital advertising as a single service when selling advertising space. This definition allows businesses to pay a uniform B&O tax rate for both online and print newspaper advertising. It also eases the tax reporting process for newspaper businesses with both print and online newspapers by allowing the online components to use the lower B&O tax rate. Online-only newspapers are taxed separately at the higher B&O service and other activities tax rate of 1.75%. In the performance statement for the reduced tax rate, the legislature's stated intent was to allow the rate to expire when revenues and business models have stabilized, which is indicated by when the average year-to-year change in gross revenue is positive over 3 years. To address the study mandate and evaluate the performance of this tax preference, we developed 3 main study questions to guide our research. First, which businesses have used the preference and how much have they saved using the lower B&O tax rate? Second, how have revenues and employment numbers changed for businesses using the preference over the past 3 years? And finally, what business models exist in the newspaper industry and have they impacted financial stability? Staff to the committee will return in July of 2022 to present the preliminary report, and the proposed final report will be presented in December of 2022. That concludes our prepared remarks, and this slide contains our contact information, and we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Can I, why is the time, a lot of times, like when we do preliminaries in September, the finals the following summer, why is there such a huge time lag on this one?
It's just because we're interns and they're letting us help them get ahead on stuff.
I can jump in and help with that, Senator. Recall that with tax preference analyses, we after we present to JLARC, then there's the process where we go in front of the Citizen Commission, and they take testimony and deliberate on the comments, and they adopt a position that gets appended to the report. So the longer lag time is to let it go through the process with the Citizen Commission, so you can hear their views before it comes back to JLARC.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess, by the way, interns, you did a great job. Very well done. You seem like official JLARC people already. And I guess, Keenan, one thing, Senator Tackle, you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, during that presentation, they were talking about the revenue from advertising, both digital and on the paper. Is it for just the advertising income, or is it for other income like the actual sale of the paper or something else they might have?
It's for all income and all business for the sale of newspapers as well.
That's what I
So
thought.
it's on their gross receipts, so everything. But it was because of the advertising, the fact that advertising, print, and digital are sold together, that they were the online and print digital forms of the same newspaper were included in one definition.
Representative Kildaw?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question related to question number 2 is phrased for the study, and it's this: why look only over the past 3 years? Is that just a recognition of sort of how big this could get? I just thinking there's just been such change over time. This was began in 2009. So can you speak to that time period?
Yeah, that's because in the performance statement, it said to suggest that we suggest ending the tax preference if they've had no positive gross revenue for 3 years. And so that's why we're specifically looking at those 3 years. We may look farther, but definitely at those 3 years.
Okay. Yeah, I anticipate, Representative, that we'll look at a longer time period, but the criteria that the legislature established for a recommendation to continue was based on the 3-year time frame, but we'll show as much information as we possibly can.
I guess what I was going to say, Keenan, is it makes kind of a macro discussion, I guess, for the committee. Is I feel like when you have the preferences that are there for like these long stretches, like 15 years, sometimes I think it'd be more helpful to try to do the analysis earlier. So like this would have been a nice one, I guess, to be able to discuss in the 21 session, whether you want to extend it, because sometimes your fiscal impacts are mitigated by extending them sooner than they are at the last minute, right, as they're expiring. And so I don't know, but there's not much we can do about that, I think, right now. But I think it's just something to consider in the future. And that only works, I think, when you have preferences there for super long durations like this one, a 15-year type duration. But any other questions for staff before we wrap up? Okay, nice job, you guys. You seem like you would be great future JLARC staffers. And we know you were, they definitely weren't doing this job for the money this summer. We'll just say that. This was their public service to the state of Washington. We really appreciate it. Okay, I think with that, we can adjourn with our pencil sharpener. And then we'll see folks at 2 o'clock who can make the N100 here. Thank you very much. Have a really good day.
Thank you.